So once again, the Monterey Public Library welcomes you to today's Cannery Row Days program. We do thank our sponsors, the City of Monterey, Cannery Row Company, Cannery Row Foundation, and the Western Flyer Foundation. I am happy to welcome Emily Gottlieb, who is the Education Director for the Western Flyer Foundation and will moderate today's discussion. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you, Francesca, and thanks again to the Monterey Public Library for hosting this event. So it's my pleasure today to introduce three guests from the Western Flyer Foundation. We have joining us today, John Gregg. John Gregg is the founder and the president of Gregg Drilling and Testing Incorporated. He started that company in 1985 and has grown it over the past 32 years to become a leader in the industry. John is also the founder and director of the Western Flyer Foundation, which is currently restoring the historic vessel that was used by author John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts on their voyage to the Sea of Cortez in 1940. The mission of the Western Flyer Foundation is to stir curiosity by connecting art and science in the spirit of John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts and the legacy of the Western Flyer. So welcome, John.
Thank you.
Today, we are also joined by Chris Chase, who's the filmmaker of today's film. He's been working as the project director with the Western Flyer Foundation for the past 4 years. He's a shipwright up in Port Townsend, Washington. And today, welcome, Chris. Thank you. Thanks for being here. We're also joined by Susan Shillinglaw today. Susan Shillinglaw serves on the board of the Western Flyer Foundation. She's a professor of English at San Jose State University whose research focuses on John Steinbeck. So welcome again, Susan. So I think we're going to hear briefly first from John, then Chris, and then Susan, and then we are going to start the film screening.
Thanks, Emily. So I was asked if I could explain my involvement in this project, and so some of you have heard it, and I apologize for repeating myself, but I'll just launch into it. So this has been a long endeavor for me. It started many years ago, and when I was a kid in Georgia, we had this bookmobile that would come around to rural areas, and you could jump on board and pick out a few books. And so I was always picking something adventure-y out because I was a kid in rural Georgia and there was nothing much to do. One thing we would do though is we could see the rockets launch from Cape Canaveral, as it was called then, Cape Kennedy now, and we could see their contrails when they launched. So all of our heroes were, astronauts and engineers. So that was our reality. So we took a cardboard box and we set it up next to our house over the gas meter. So that was our capsule, and we'd go in there and mess with the gas meter and pretend the gauges were our rocket control console. So anything on the bookmobile that had any kind of adventure or science, I would grab. And usually it was way over my head, but that was okay. Oddly enough, I grabbed this book, the log of the Sea of Cortez, and it was way over my head. I didn't understand any of it. I still don't understand like half of it. But the part that I got was that far from being science, like with lab coats and beakers and sterile environments, these guys brought to life that you could go out in the field and have these adventures and study things and discover things and relate things back and forth to, different size groups, different cohorts, from the small to the large. And so I was really enamored with it. And even though I couldn't understand the book, I read everything that Steinbeck wrote, and I became a big fan. And it was always in the back of my head that this boat, which is kind of a character in the book, I always wondered what happened to it. So for years, I sort of looked for it, and being, the last of the boomers, I didn't think to Google it quickly enough. And so was just asking people in shipyards and things. And I heard little rumors and little hints of its existence still. And some people told me it was crushed up. And finally, I Googled it and I found it, and it had been found already by some groups in Monterey that were trying to raise money to restore it. That kind of fell flat when a real estate developer came in and bought the boat out from under the city, basically, and had plans to use the boat in his restaurant, to cut it into 3 pieces and use it as a prop in his bar and restaurant. So he was busy doing that. Meantime, the boat was sinking up in Washington in its berth a few times, and so it was becoming basically a complete write-off. It spent, I think, 3 months on the bottom at one point. So it was basically a wrecked, and couldn't even be transported to California, in all honesty. So I dealt with the developer over a couple of years, and finally ended up able to purchase the boat, and then went up to Port Townsend and found a bunch of guys that knew how to work on wooden boats, and formed this lucky group that I just Forrest Gumped my way into with Susan and Gilly and Chris, and it's been just a real pleasure going through the process of restoring the boat. And the whole idea of restoring the boat is in the spirit of Steinbeck and Ricketts, who weren't really sentimental men. They didn't have any use for old dusty museum pieces. They were all about the future, and that's our motive for the flyer. We want to always be looking forward. So it's a good platform for us to use to educate people, both young people and educators, and use the boat as an ambassador to run up and down the coast between the Gulf of California and Alaska and visit places that don't get a lot of attention. And so we'll pull into these places and hopefully be able to do some research with local people on local problems, and also make the example of this breakdown that we're trying to do, where we want to blur the lines between art and science. We think that they're one and the same many times, and so for a long time they've been separate camps, and we're trying to bring those two things together. So with that, I'll shut up and let other people talk.
Thanks so much, John. It's wonderful to have you here. I think we're going to hear from Chris Chase next.
Yeah, thank you for letting me be part of this today. My relationship with the Western Flyer started really right after John purchased the boat in 2015. Like he said, he had come to Port Townsend, Washington, where I was a professional shipwright of over 30 years, working on wood boats every day, part of a boat yard, part of a crew working on boats. John needed this boat to be restored. We got a relationship going. It was a couple of years into that relationship when I was sitting on the side of the table representing the shipyard's interest in the project, that I had really just fallen in love with the project, everyone involved, the people that were come to see the boat, the stories that they would leave behind were really starting to leave an impression on me. And that kind of gave me the impetus to actually quit that career of 30 years and step to the other side of the desk and take a job working directly for the Western Flyer Foundation. So in my day-to-day role, it's a little bit overseeing the project, but really the shipyard that's doing the work is very, very capable. And over the last 4 years that I've been involved directly with the Flyer Foundation, it's really been public outreach, building YouTube videos, building promotional videos, doing public speaking about the project, doing some door-to-door, face-to-face fundraising opportunities. So it's been an incredible project, but really it's been a life-turning experience for me, from a career of over 30 plus years in a small town working on wood boats very happily, to this whole new world of being exposed to the Western Flyer and all it brings. So, but you're going to hear a lot about me in this video, so I'm not going to say much more here. And at the end, we'll do a little question and answers.
Thank you, Chris. We're so glad to have you here today. Susan, I'll pass it over to you now.
think Susan is muted.
There we go. Okay, got it. Well, thank you for being here. This is a wonderful little film that was made by a filmmaker down in Los Angeles who did it for the Wooden Boat Festival. So it was the first time it was shown was for the Wooden Boat Festival. So Chris talks a lot about how the boat is being restored, which I find fascinating. And I wanted to, add a kind of a footnote to that. The very first thing that Steinbeck published was actually an article in El Gabalon, his Salinas High School yearbook. And it was a little piece on how valuable wood shops were for the high school curriculum, that everyone should learn to work with their hands, and that's what a wood shop, the opportunity the wood shop provided. So a lot of high schools don't have wood shops anymore, but I think for Steinbeck, it was incredibly valuable. He did tinker with wood throughout his life. He carved things, carved a box for the novel East of Eden, etc. So I think the focus on wood and working with your hands would be sort of something that is quintessentially sort of Steinbeckian. He loved boats. He had a boat at the end of his life and loved all of his characters. Think of how many of his characters really do work with their hands. So I hope you enjoyed that part of the video. I have been involved with the Western Flyer Foundation for the past several years, and got to go and see some of the wood sourced in Berea, Kentucky, where they are doing horse and mule logging, which was fascinating as they select logs to harvest. And so a lot of the lumber in the boat is sort of ecologically harvested and as much as possible. So it was a wonderful experience to see that. One of the men I met there subsequently bought new horses. He sold his mules and bought horses, and he wrote me and said, the logger said, "You'll like the name of my new team. I first bought Lenny and the next week bought George. So now his horses are Lenny and George." So the Steinbeck spirit lives on in Kentucky, where the words came from. And finally, I want to close by reading one passage, my favorite passage from John Steinbeck's Sea of Cortez, because I think that sets up really what this boat is going to represent in the future, and the education program, which is going to be devoted to the intersection of science and humanities, and a thoroughly ecological vision for, to provide students of all grades in the future. So here's what Steinbeck says as he, in the end of the introduction to the log from the Sea of Cortez. He said, "We take a tiny colony of soft corals from a rock in a little water world, and that isn't terribly important to the tide pool. 50 miles away, the Japanese shrimp boats are dredging with overlapping scoops, bringing up tons of shrimp, rapidly destroying the species so that it may never come back, and with the species destroying the ecological balance of the whole region. That isn't very important in the world. And thousands of miles away, the great bombs are falling, and the stars are not moved thereby. None of it's important, or all of it is." And I think Steinbeck is reminding us to pay attention, of course, to the small things, to the microcosm, and to the macrocosm. And the Western Flyer Foundation and the boat will be dedicated to that vision. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the film. Francesca, go ahead. Let's sail.
John and Chris with us, so we'll be taking questions in the chat box, or if you'd like to go into gallery view and go ahead and unmute yourself, you can ask a question. So I guess to start it off, I'll ask a question. I would love to hear, this is probably one for you, Chris, but if you could tell everybody sort of where the boat is right now, sort of what's currently being worked on the boat, and yeah, just kind of give us all an update. That would be great.
Yeah, so the majority of that footage was, let's see, the last footage you saw there was probably June of 2020. So a little bit of work has been done for sure. COVID definitely slowed the project down. But since you last saw in that video, and maybe if you follow me on YouTube, there's been a plywood deck built onto the boat. The outer bulwarks, which are the wall that, it's a 2.5 foot tall wall that goes around the deck, keeping you on the boat, has been built and put into place. And generally things have been cleaned up, smoothed down. Some paint has been applied, primer paint. So actually quite a lot of work has been done in the last, let's see, that's been about 4 months since the last footage in that video was seen. So project is moving along nicely. They just started corking the hull, which is the process of putting a material between each hull plank to make it watertight and structurally sound. That just started in the last 2 days. So the shop has a very unique singing sound. That long handled mallet that is used to cork a boat makes a beautiful sound. So a lot of great stuff has been happening. So the boat is still on target to be out of that building in the spring, maybe late spring of 2021. And we're all fingers crossed, hoping the boat returns to Monterey, potentially in late 21. So lots of great stuff's happening.
Wonderful. Any other questions from participants? I see a lot of people out there today, so anyone like to raise their hand or unmute themselves? Okay, Jeanette, I see you.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Is my audio on? Okay. I'm wondering, thank you. First of all, thank you. This has been a fabulous presentation, and I loved seeing it and hearing his words. But I wondered if there was going to be any sort of book form of this process, or is it strictly going to be on video?
I suppose all three of us can answer that question. First of all, hi, Jeanette. Nice to see you. Right now we're documenting the boat in a lot of different ways. We're doing it in video. There's thousands of photographs being taken of the boat, several by different caliber photographers, myself up to actually one of our friends of the project is a former geographic photographer. So there's a lot of photo documentation being done, and then the words being put to that story certainly, hopefully will follow. But I think Susan could speak to the words, but the actual visuals, I think, are being well captured at this point in the story. And we certainly have visions to make a much longer, maybe 60 to 90 minute long film that's really more the journey of the Western Flyer from her conception in 1937 to her place in history in the world of ecology, but then tie that together with the changing environments that we live in. So there's a lot of different ways to tell this story, and print could very well be one of them. So I'll let Susan speak to the words of print. Yeah.
Well, there is a writer who's interested in doing something about the boat and the restoration. And so I think he's been following Chris around and going various places. And so he's interested in doing something. I mean, it's such a great story. I think the whole notion of travel makes this compelling, because this is really a journey, a text about a journey. Our second education module that Emily is working on is really about journeys and trips. And, Steinbeck wrote several journey novels. Travels with Charlie, Russian Journal, and Sea of Cortez are about, trips that he took. And so I think people are fascinated with that whole sense of restlessness and going someplace. And you could write about it in many different ways, is my point. You could write just about the restoration, or you could see how this book and this project fits into a larger kind of genre of travel narratives. So explore. Or you could tell a story of John's life, starting from that rocket ship with the box over his, and then how he got from there to a boat. So that would be a more personal angle. I love the rocket ship.
I think even my mother would read that book.
Thank
So
you.
I've always thought there was so much more to the story than the black and white boat project. It's very easy to be attracted to the restoration of the boat. It's very black and white, but the story it encompasses so much more than that. It's all of the people's lives, that journey, if we keep using the word journey, it's all of those people's journey to this moment, this boat. It's the trip to the Sea of Cortez. it's all the things. It's an incredible story. And I think that's been the greatest thing for me, is the thousands of people I've met. And I just love hearing people's stories. I'm a junkie for people's life stories. So hearing that personal journey, how did John Gregg get to this boat? How did Susan, how did Gilly, Emily, every one of us is brought to this story for a reason. So like Susan said, it's a black and white story of restoring a boat, but there's so much more to it. It's in the nuances of this story that the book will be written. So anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It looks like we have another question from someone in the audience who has raised their hand.
Yes. My name is Gay O'Renion, and I would like to know what the approximate cost of this wonderful project is from the time that this boat was purchased, the estimated cost, and then maybe the actual cost. It looks like it's going to be a fortune, but it looks beautiful.
I guess I should answer that. So, you know, when you see the pictures of that boat when it came out of the water, it had sunk, you know, and I think I paid $1 million for that mess. So, and then we've put
What?
Yeah, not.
Oh my God. Okay.
Not much of a businessman. And then I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 more. Chris, is that right?
Yeah, I think, you know, by the time it's in the water and it's sitting in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, and it's the Western Flyer we all want to see, and it's executing the mission we have envisioned for it, we'll be tipping $4 million. But, you know, it's priceless, and it's a lot of money. You know, it does on the surface seems like a lot of money when you mention some of these numbers, but it's a project that's leaving a mark on an incredible legacy and history. So yeah, it's hard. I've asked this question a lot. I'm sure John has asked this question regularly. I usually just tell people more than $10.
Well, I have to say the workmanship that we saw in this film was just incredible.
I would agree 100% with you.
It's just absolutely wonderful to see that there's that kind of terrific abilities these days that is being put to use. It's wonderful.
And to add something to that, I think all the people who are working on it, John has said this several times as a script, they are taking so much pride at being a part of the project that, you know, it's a labor of love for them too. So every board is shaped with love. So it's kind of nice to think about it that way.
It's actually been a problem. Chris and I were trying to get the process speeded up a few times, and after a couple of years we realized this is a project of a lifetime for these craftsmen, and they will not be hurried. They every board is like they do their best ability. So we've had no effect on trying to speed them up at all. So the product is just, you know, really amazing. It's like a piece of high quality furniture. Every single cut is perfect. So
yeah, priceless. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was you just answered the question that I was going to pose to you, and that was what are the key differences between when she was built originally and what you guys are doing now? Because you had mentioned they were pumping them out like pickup trucks, you know, kind of assembly line type effort. But I think, John, you just nailed it as to why this is taking a longer time frame than what they were doing originally. So thank you for that.
yeah, and some of the stuff they're replacing, you know, they didn't think these boats would last more than 10 or 15 years. They really were, you know, mass marketed, and you can see, you know, they were hurrying in some places, and you know, it was pretty rough cuts and joints and things, but the boat lasted 80 years. So I mean, they knew what they were doing, but they were trying to put them out quickly, and now it's like a piano. So
yeah, thank you.
So there's a question in the chat here from Michael asking, will the Western Flyer Foundation be posting port and at-sea schedules in case I want to track it down when it sails next year? And the answer is yes, we will. We'll be putting them on the website. We'll have a place where we'll be updating the location of the boat once it is moving around and doing programs. So yeah, you'll absolutely be able to track it. And for now, you can track the progress on the Western Flyer Foundation's YouTube channel, where you can see some of the updates and restoration that's going on. And I'll put that into the chat for everyone to see.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Emily, you know, the boat only goes 8 miles an hour and it's only 77 feet long. So we've always known that its bandwidth of interaction with the community and the public is going to be pretty small. So we've always included a huge element of public connection, be it if you're in Washington, D.C., if you're in London, or if you're in Monterey and you want to know where the boat is. So that's always going to be a huge part of that. And we started that with the YouTube channel. It's been following the restoration really closely, and that will continue on, certainly on those maiden voyages, those first trips back to the Sea of Cortez. We're starting to diversify into some of the education programs, some of the other tentacles of the octopus here that are the Western Flyer Foundation. So certainly, you know, being able to keep track of this boat is a critical part of the story, I think, for everyone's engagement.
I also want to point out a student comment here from, because he's a student of one of my students, and he lives in King City, so he's a high school student. He has a wonderful, John, I don't know if you saw it, but I wanted to point it out to you, about the bookmobile and the impact that a bookmobile made in King City. And I have memories of getting graphic novels from there about Star Wars or Transformers, and then the Boxcar Children's series. So bookmobiles have played a huge role in people's lives, you know.
Yeah, it was actually a program started by Jackie Kennedy and a rural bookmobile program in the 60s, and it was really successful.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. Huh. Interesting.
So I have something I'd like to comment. So you're talking about the cost of the boat today, just so people understand, those boats were never inexpensive. So to buy the Western Flyer, when it was built in 1937, probably cost close to $35,000, which would have included the net, which would be another $10,000 or $15,000. So it was very expensive then. And then I was the Maritime Museum for many years. I had a contract for a Monterey sardine boat built after World War II that cost, the contract built by the Western Boat Company was $75,000. So it was a lot of money.
It's a good point, and it was a lot of money back then, and they usually couldn't afford it. So the Western Boat Company would remain partial owners of it for a long time. And they had complicated ownership, you know, structures where they'd all share in the catch. So it was.
Yeah, a friend of mine, a guy named Frank Monaco, was the first Japanese American to have a Monterey purse seiner in all of California as a Japanese fisherman, and he got it in 1928. I said, where did you guys get the money? They had that kind of money, and he told me there was a engine company in San Francisco called Enterprise Engine Company, had just designed this new diesel engine. It was kind of experimental, and came down to Monterey. I said, anybody willing to put our engine into your boat, we'll carry the note for you. And Frank is the only guy that raised his hand.
Huh. Interesting. It was a diesel engine?
Diesel engine, yeah.
Oh, wow. And how long did it last?
He had to replace that boat in 1938, and that's a whole other very complicated story.
Oh, interesting.
Court Lewis chiming in from Tennessee, if I may.
Yeah, please. I
guess a question for John. When you start these excursions after the boat finally gets wet, I'm assuming they'll be overnight anyway, at least more than one night. So how many will the boat sleep, and are there kitchen facilities, and is that kind of, will it have that kind of live aboard aspect to it, or
yeah? Hi, Court. Nice to talk to you. Court runs a radio station on the East Coast, so it's nice to hear from you again, Court. Yeah, it'll be a small. I think we can sleep 6 or 8, but we envision it mostly to go down to the Sea of Cortez with a shadow vessel that'll have berthing for 40 or 50 people, because there's a lot of interest from science and writers and things to be on board. So we want to make sure that we make it available to a lot of people.
Sounds like a good plan.
So the idea is that, you know, it'll anchor in these different bays, and, you know, you'll have events on board at night when it's anchored, where you have different, guest talk and demonstrations and things. And then
So you'll have a mothership.
Yeah, then you have a mothership to provide most of the services.
Good deal. Thanks.
Thanks, Cord.
Looks like we have another question in the chat coming in from Mark. Mark says that he photographed the flyer a couple of years ago, and this question is for Chris. Has work on the Monterey dock for the flyer begun yet?
I'll take the question in the beginning because I know Mark. Nice to see you again, Mark. Mark took some beautiful photographs of the boat before it had started to get dismantled. So, and I think those photographs will be part of some presentation going forward. So, but to really let that question be answered, I think maybe John would be better at that question on maybe restate.
Yeah, the city's agreed to give us birthing facilities there, but it literally takes an act of Congress because it's federal facility that they have to transfer to the city. And I don't know what's going on, but it seems like Congress is busy right now, and our boat isn't the top of their agenda. So it might be a while.
It's Colin Levings. Can people hear me? I'm calling from Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah, you're coming in clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for Chris. First of all, thanks for the very interesting video of the whole show. As you know, I met you in 2016. Perhaps you remember me.
Yes.
I was just wondering, was the winch still on the vessel when you salvaged her, or was she well out of the trawling game by then?
First of all, hello, Colin. Colin has a incredible connection to this story. There was a photograph of the boat in the video of the boat with some crab pots, and it's rolling over. And Colin actually took that photograph in 1964. He has an incredible history of the Western Flyer. He spent some time aboard the Western Flyer during a 1963 halibut commission study of the waters of the nearshore Washington, Alaska water. So Colin has an incredible connection to this story, and a wonderful man to get to know. But no, none of the winches were on board the boat. You know, I'm assuming you're saying the original Seine winch. And no, that winch had been long gone. You know, the boat had been converted so many different times. It did have a windlass for anchoring, and that also had been different. So to answer...
Yeah, what I was referring to actually was that, as I understand, it was a pretty innovative trawl winch that Dan Lukita put on the boat when I was, just before I went aboard, I believe.
Right.
So I guess it's long gone in the sands of time somewhere.
Yeah, that is long gone. You know, after Dan sold the boat, you know, a lot of transformation happened to that boat in the late 60s, early 70s. So it had been converted to just a tender. So that Seine winch had been removed off the boat at that point.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, nice to see you, Colin. We got to get together again.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Colin. Would anyone else from the audience like to ask a question?
This is why this is such a fun project. We get to talk to guys like Colin. Like that, it's amazing to me how many people have approached us with really amazing stories, and it's just been the best part of the whole project, and it makes me really happy to think that that'll continue into the future. So thank you, Colin.
I would add the exact same, you know, just to be able to speak to someone like Colin, who spent his life studying at a UBC Canada. You know, he was one of the only people left alive that actually worked and fished on that boat when it was called the Western Flyer. You know, it had its name changed from Western Flyer to the Gemini in the late 1960s. And I think there's 2 or 3 people that I know alive that actually spent time. So it's great getting to know people like Colin. It's just been incredible, and it's an incredible resource for this whole fishery. So and this whole project. So and he's provided some incredible photos of the boat in its early days. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where my old bunk used to be.
You'll have to take a ride in it, Colin.
Yeah.
We won't make you work this time. Not too much.
Thanks.
Well, kind of on that note, to wrap us up, I would love to hear from each of you, Susan, Chris, and John, just in one sentence, what is something that you are most excited about, most looking forward to for the future of the Western Flyer?
You go, Susan.
You can go more than one sentence is okay.
You're the word person, Susan.
Well, I want to stand on the shore of Monterey Bay and watch that boat come back into Monterey Bay. That's just going to be, for me, the thrill of just watching it sail back in. Of course, all the other things too, the education program, going to Baja, etc. But to have it sail here is going to be really exciting. Coming home.
Yeah. For me, you know, this project of working on the Western Flyer started as just another wood boat project, but it has been the biggest pivotal moment in my entire adult life. And I'm just really excited about where the journey goes. You know, life's got to be eyes wide open. I always say, you know, there's no U-turns in life. It's just a straight line forward. So I'm just excited to see where this goes because it's a heck of a ride so far. So I'm excited for the future, the passion that it brings. That was more than one sentence. John, you can close it down.
Oh, you know, all of that I agree with. This is a little bit of my Moby Dick, my white whale. I just hope I don't end up entangled on the outside of it, you know. Waving it.
Remember, Ishmael was alive to tell the tale. So there's that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks to all of you. I'm sure I speak for all the participants and the watchers, the silent majority watching the thing, I guess. But to all of you for putting this on, it's been really great. And I guess really, especially to John and Chris for this, you know, enormous, mind-boggling undertaking from start to not finished yet, but to have finished before too very long. It's really something else. Quite a project that's kind of gives you hope for the future of mankind in some odd way.
Thanks, Court. That's nice.
Humankind, we should say, huh?
And for me, having put on many programs throughout my career, to have a program on Zoom is a little light, a little beacon in this, you know, time that we can have people from Tennessee and Canada and just around the country join us. I think that's just, I don't know, it's a beacon. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you all again to our participants for coming today. Thank you to the Monterey Public Library again for hosting these wonderful events. Thanks to Susan, Chris, and John for being on today and for answering questions and for sharing this awesome film. Before we sign off today, I have a couple of updates about the next 2 weeks for the Cannery Row Day events. Next Thursday on October 9th, we have a slight change in schedule. We're going to be showing a film called Inside Hopeton Cannery, which was filmed in 1943. According to historian Tim Thomas, this 20-minute film is the best footage of the canneries that exists. Tim Thomas will be introducing the film. He'll be talking about the fishing industry and the workers. And then historian Kim Goodmanson will be joining the discussion after the film. Then the following Thursday on November 5th at 2 p.m., David Ward, the writer and director of the 1982 film Cannery Row, will be interviewed by Jan Price about the making of the film. Please watch Cannery Row in advance of the discussion and bring your questions. So you can check out a Cannery Row DVD from the Monterey Public Library, or you can rent it on YouTube or Amazon Prime for about $1.99. So we hope to see you all again at those two events. And then finally at the final Cannery Row Day event on November 7th. So thanks again to all of our participants and to our speakers today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon, everybody.
Yes. Thank you, Emily.
It was a great show. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette.